Hey there, sleepy historian. Tonight, you're not a war hero, just a soldier, barely competent, simply available. That's all the German Navy needs. No one asked if you could swim. No one cared about your claustrophobia or mechanical illiteracy. You were already teetering on the edge of a breakdown, but you had a pulse, and the Reich had a dire shortage of warm bodies willing to cram into a pressurized metal coffin and call it patriotism. So here you are, wedged into the belly of a World War II U-boat with 50 other men, a single working toilet, and zero long-term survival prospects. The air already reeks of staleness. The bread grows mold before you even leave port. Before the depth charges rain down, before the oxygen vanishes, before the cook loses his last shred of sanity over a rotten potato, do me a favor. Drop a comment about where you're listening from and what ungodly hour you've chosen to drift off to tales like this. I love knowing who's tuning in from across the globe. If you'd like early, ad-free access or just want to support the show, check the Patreon link below. For now, lie back. Get comfortable. Let's begin. You're no hero, not even brave. Just young, exhausted, and clueless. You've got lungs, 2 hands, and a heartbeat more than enough for the Kriegsmarine. Whether swept up in patriotic frenzy or snagged by the draft net, it doesn't matter now. You're here. Uniform issued, hair shorn, identity stripped to a last name and serial number. The posters promised you'd see the world. The recruiter swore you'd make your country proud. No one mentioned your constant companions, mold, and the creeping amnesia of sunlight's touch. Efficiency governs your induction, not the good kind, just the brisk, bureaucratic sort. Cold, impersonal, more concerned with throughput than outcomes. You're herded through medical inspections like livestock, stripped under buzzing lights by men who forgot how to smile before the war began. They check your teeth, your ears, your ability to nod on command. The bar is subterranean. If you can stand upright and aren't bleeding from both nostrils, congratulations, you're submarine material. Swimming skills? Irrelevant. Drowning would only prolong the inevitable. Then comes the paperwork. Endless forms crammed with jargon, unexplained acronyms, waivers you don't read. You sign everything because you must, because the boys ahead of you, some younger, some already regretful, shuffle forward in silence. One jokes that U-boats are elite, the best of the best. No one laughs. You realize elite here is code for expendable, isolated, statistically doomed. But it's too late. You're in. They call it training. It's really a rehearsal for drowning, suffocating, or burning alive in a metal pipe 200 feet underwater. The instructors sugarcoat nothing. Their goal? Teach you just enough to keep the boat from killing you before the Allies get their turn. Days start early and late. Every task chips away at your hope. They claim it's preparation. What they omit. Most of what you're learning will be useless the moment something goes wrong, and it will. The first week is theory. Charts, diagrams, lectures from men who reek of burnt rubber and sleep in their uniforms. You memorize the U-boat's anatomy, torpedo tubes, galley, coffin-sized bunks stacked like crypt shelves. You learn ballast tanks, emergency procedures, that you know panic will erase those checklists when the hull buckles and lights flicker. Still, you drill until your knees ache and fingers blister from escape masks and imaginary oil spills. Then, hands-on training. A decommissioned death trap, painted to reassure but stinking of failure and stale soup. Simulations escalate from absurd to terrifying. Sealing a flooding compartment blindfolded, upside down, soaked. Fire drills with real smoke that leaves you retching. You crawl through tunnels too narrow for comfort, trying not to imagine how they'll feel when submerged and panicked. Loading torpedoes, securing hatches, cranking air filters until your arms burn. Because if the CO2 scrubbers fail, your lungs are next. Every skill is taught under worst-case conditions. That's the point. You're never dry, never rested, never more than 10 feet from someone who smells like canned meat in despair. Instructors bark, not for discipline, but because they've forgotten how to speak softly. One veteran of 5 patrols has a permanent eye twitch and trails off mid-sentence when recounting the time we almost didn't make it back. No one asks for the ending. The food during training is suspiciously edible, bread not yet rock hard, cheese not yet lethal, occasional sausage slices of dubious origin. This isn't kindness. It's bait, a fleeting taste of a life you'll never reclaim. Active U-boat rations will make your digestive system mourn. But here, in the mess hall, it's almost pleasant. If you ignore the mildew creeping up the walls and the muffled sobs from the latrine, sleep is a myth. Your bunk, if you're lucky, is a wooden plank with a mattress thinner than a suggestion. You're packed shoulder to shoulder with snoring, teeth-grinding trainees. Lights never fully extinguish. Heaters oscillate between Arctic and Inferno, as if the building itself mocks the ocean's cruelty. Night soundtracked by coughs, curses, and sleep paralysis screams. Morning arrives too soon. Always. They even teach you how to drown, just in case you hope to survive. Bulky rubber suits, water tanks, escape drills. You practice slow ascents to avoid lung rupture, opening hatches against water pressure, counting seconds without air while trapped under overturned tables. None of this comforts. It just makes your eventual death feel procedural. Morale officers visit crisp uniforms, unnaturally white teeth prattling about glory, the fatherland, how history will remember you. Then they vanish, presumably to lunch somewhere above sea level. You remain, knee-deep in cold water, gripping a rusted wrench, wondering if your fingers will ever thaw. By training's end, you're not stronger or braver. Just dulled, sanded down into something that follows orders. You've lost weight, stopped asking questions, started sleeping in boots just in case. The instructors declare you ready. You don't feel ready, but the train awaits. The sea awaits. And your U-boat, your new home, awaits. No brass bands, no salutes, no proud handshakes. Just a steel cylinder reeking of regret, designed to sink on purpose. Climbing down the conning tower ladder, rungs slick with condensation, boots barely fitting, you hit the deck with a wet clang, immediately ducking to avoid skull-to-pipe collisions. The air hits like a damp sponge. Hot, thick, stale, a cocktail of sweat, grease, mildew, unwashed bodies, and something between meat and melted rubber. You'd name the stench if you weren't busy not gagging. Flickering yellow-brown lights cast everyone in a sickly pallor. You shuffle forward, hunched, posture already crumbling. A petty officer leads you through a pipe-like corridor, dodging wires, stepping over bulkheads, sidestepping dinner spills. Crewmen glance at your boots and return to dials, pots, or vacant stares at walls. Their faces are gaunt, hair greasy, eyes glazed with the look of men who've accepted death as the easier option. No one smiles. This isn't a place for smiles. Your bunk is a shared rectangle of fabric and rust wedged between torpedo racks, barely wide enough to turn, barely long enough to stretch. The mattress sags. The blanket is damp. The pillow smells like someone else's scalp. You're told not to unpack. There's no space. Your gear stays in a duffel beneath the bunk, behind someone else's boots. Don't touch the boots. They bite back. Every inch of the sub is cluttered. Levers, gauges, wires, pipes wrapped in oily tape, hooks dangling ghostly lanterns. No decorations, no nameplates, just machinery and penciled warnings. Don't trust this valve. Watch your head. Pray harder. The galley is a joke. A nook with a single stove, battered pans, and a cupboard that rattles ominously. You'll grow to love it. It's one of the few warm spots. The tour ends abruptly. No questions expected. You're handed a duty roster and told to make yourself useful. That's the only rule. Be useful. If not, you're ballast. You begin to grasp the scale of your new reality. This isn't the clean, dry training mock-up with functional safety gear. This boat is alive, groaning, dripping, swaying with the sea's whims. Nothing is still. Nothing is quiet. Everything is too close. No privacy, no solitude, no corner untouched by metal, fabric, or another man's knee. Every surface is worn by too many hands. Every smell is permanent. Lying on your bunk, you stare at a loose, rusted bolt inches from your nose. How long has it hung there? What happens if it falls? Will the air ever feel normal? Someone starts singing off-key, not a hopeful tune, but the kind hummed while waiting for worse. That's when it sinks in. This is your life now. Eating, sleeping, sweating, pissing here. Maybe dying here. Vanishing without a ripple. You're no longer a land dweller. You're a cog in a U-boat, a damp, cramped machine slinking through the dark, praying not to be noticed. No glory, just survival, measured in shifts, mold, and the slow erosion of your humanity. Welcome aboard. Sleep aboard a U-boat isn't something you do. It's something you negotiate, steel in fragments between engine roars, alarm bells, and the symphony of bodily functions from 50 men stacked like mismatched silverware. Your bunk, if you can call it that, isn't yours alone. It's part of a shift cycle shared with two others, a system called hot bunking, which sounds almost cozy until you realize the mattress is still warm with the sweat and breath of the last occupant when you crawl in. The space is barely wider than your shoulders, just long enough to fit you if you keep your knees locked straight and don't mind your feet brushing a bulkhead. The mattress is thin, sagging like it's given up on offering support. The lone blanket is perpetually damp, not from leaks, just the ambient moisture of breath, condensation, and dread. Your pillow smells faintly of mildew and strongly of someone else's scalp, gritty with dried salt and inexplicable breadcrumbs. You learn not to ask why. Sleep comes in 6-hour blocks, when nothing interrupts, which it always does. A shift change, a drill, an actual emergency, indistinguishable from drills, but with more screaming. You're expected to fall asleep instantly and wake faster. Comfort is a luxury. The constant sway and mechanical noise make it feel like napping inside a washing machine left on spin cycle. When you do drift off, it's a fragile, shallow unconsciousness, shattered by footsteps, muttered curses, or the wet slap of bare feet heading to the latrine. And the sounds. Oh, the sounds. Snoring in every pitch, from nasal huffs to full-throated honks that rattle the bunks. Farting is constant, digestive systems rebelling against canned rations. Teeth grinding, sleep-talking, thrashing. One crewman chases invisible foes through forests every night. Another whispers numbers and apologies until someone snaps, "Shut up." You use earplugs if you can find them, wads of cloth if you can't. They barely help. Then there's the smell. The air never circulates, it thickens. Each hour aboard adds another layer to the olfactory soup. Diesel fumes, stale sweat, mold, unwashed hair, foot rot, wet wool, canned beans, and the chemical tang of grease that never quite cleans anything. When you lie down, the stench envelopes you, seeping into skin, clinging to bedding. Eventually, you stop noticing, not because it's gone, but because your brain surrenders. Rituals emerge. Everyone has them. Folding clothes just so, tucking boots in precise spots, cramming meager belongings into wall cracks to feign privacy. You sleep with an arm pinned under your body to avoid invading a neighbor's space, a cap over your face to block flickering lights. You count heartbeats, breaths, pressure gauge clicks, anything to forget where you are. Sometimes it works. Usually it doesn't. When your shift ends, there's no alarm, just a hand on your boot and a hiss name. You roll out stiff, groggy, already sweating. Your replacement slides in as you stand, still buttoning his trousers, yanking the blanket over his face without a word. You try not to think about how much of his skin now touches surfaces that just touched yours. Modesty? Shame? No room for either. Just rotation. Officers have their own bunks, slightly larger, with partitions offering the illusion of privacy. They sleep uninterrupted, unless things go catastrophically wrong. You envy them, but not much. No insulation can mute the truth. The hull is centimeters thick, and beyond it waits pressure, silence, death. Some nights, you don't get your full shift. Engines stutter. A sonar ping echoes. A depth charge lands too close. Everyone scrambles for damage control, leaping from bunks half-conscious, ribs bruised from colliding with bulkheads in the dark. No questions. Just move. Sleep can wait, if there's a later. Over time, sleep becomes abstract. You measure it not in hours, but in whether you dreamed. You rarely do, and when you do, it's never good. You forget how it feels to lie down without bracing for impact, to stretch fully, to rest. Sleep used to be peace. Now it's just pause. There is one toilet for 50 men. Let that sink in. This isn't just inconvenient. It's a daily exercise in humiliation and survival. The head, as it's officially called, is a claustrophobic metal closet barely large enough to close the door, assuming you're desperate enough to want privacy, which most aren't. The door doesn't latch properly anyway. The moment you hear the click of the lock, you can guarantee someone will start pounding within seconds. Dignity left this boat the moment it left port. The toilet itself is a mechanical monstrosity that requires its own training manual. You can't simply sit and flush. That would be too civilized. Instead, it's a multi-step ritual involving valves, pressure releases, and precise timing. Get the sequence wrong, and you will, and one of two horrors awaits. Either the system clogs and refuses to flush, or it backfires violently, spraying wastewater where no wastewater should ever go. Both scenarios end with cursing, mopping, and existential questioning. Venting directly into the sea sounds efficient until you consider the physics. Too deep? External water pressure overwhelms the system, and seawater comes rushing in with terrifying enthusiasm. Too shallow? Waste lingers in the tank just long enough to ferment into something biblical. Sometimes it half flushes, leaving behind a sinister slurry that clings to the bowl like it's plotting revenge. You'll either smell it or, worse, hear it sloshing behind the walls at night. Toilet paper is rationed like gold. When supplies run low, and they always do, sailors resort to newspaper scraps, rags, or the least disgusting corner of their undershirts. You'll know when someone's done this. Their laundry develops a life of its own. Hygiene is theoretical at best. There's no sink in the toilet closet, just a communal basin near the galley where hands are washed, meaning every meal carries the faint bouquet of someone else's intestinal distress. The soap, when available, resembles congealed fat and smells like engine grease. You use it anyway, clinging to the illusion of cleanliness. Timing is everything. Mornings are chaos. A line of twitching men doing the calculus of whether they can hold it another 10 minutes or need to find a bucket. Late nights are quieter but riskier. That's when the plumbing likes to rebel. You enter seeking relief and emerge soaked in humiliation, clutching a wrench and muttering about valve seals. Everyone has a toilet horror story. Everyone. When the system fails completely, and it will, the dreaded backup appears, the sanitary bucket. A metal pail with a lid, stored under a bench like some cursed relic. It's not meant for regular use, but on a U-boat, there are no regular days. When deployed, the bucket becomes a focus of communal hatred. You carry it to a semi-private corner, squat awkwardly, and try to pretend you're anywhere else. If you're lucky, someone holds up a towel as a privacy screen. If you're unlucky, you make eye contact with a crewmate mid-business. Neither of you ever recovers. Disposal is a group ordeal, carrying the sloshing bucket to the waste hatch when the boat surfaces. Sometimes it spills. Sometimes the lid fails. There are smells that follow you into the afterlife. Noise is its own torture. The head isn't soundproofed. Every grunt, splash, and bodily protest echoes down the corridor. The unspoken rule: pretend you didn't hear anything. No one speaks of it. No one jokes. The fiction is maintained. No one actually uses the toilet. It's cleaner that way, spiritually, if not physically. By week 2, the head becomes a cursed shrine, used by all, hated by all. Maintenance is constant and revolting, involving rusted panels caked with decades of filth just to tighten a bolt that'll loosen again in 3 days. There's no glory in cleaning the head, but if you don't, the consequences are apocalyptic. Eventually, you adapt. You time your bodily functions around the head's moods. You eat less, drink less, live in mild dehydration just to avoid the ordeal. You lie in your bunk with a full bladder, bargaining with yourself. Just hold on until watch change, until the line thins, until the smell becomes unbearable. The worst part isn't the filth, the noise, or the lack of privacy. It's that you stop reacting. This cramped, reeking box becomes just another system to manage. The toilet doesn't break your spirit, it absorbs it. You become part of the waste disposal cycle, another function in the boat's grim machinery. Food aboard a U-boat isn't nourishment. It's edible despair served on a tin plate. At the start of patrol, things seem almost tolerable. The bread is stale, but recognizable. Canned meats bear labels, though the contents rarely match. Open a tin marked pork, and you'll find gelatinous tendons floating in gray jelly. Powdered eggs rehydrate into a sulfur yellow sludge that tastes like damp socks. For a few precious days, there might even be fresh onions swinging in nets or apples wrapped in newspaper. These are treated like religious relics. A single onion can silence the entire mess. But this illusion shatters quickly. Storage conditions are abysmal. Too warm, too damp, too close to the diesel engines. Mold spreads like gossip. Bread turns green within days. Potatoes sprout grotesque white tendrils, as if trying to escape their own decay. Still, they're eaten. A rotten potato is better than no potato. Nothing gets thrown away unless it starts moving on its own, and even then, it's debatable. Canned goods last longer, but come with their own Russian roulette. Some tins bulge ominously, a telltale sign of botulism. The crew jokes about it with the same gallows humor reserved for depth charges. We'll all get it eventually. Might as well laugh now. You don't taste test. You eat what you're given and pray your stomach remembers how to digest. The cook, if you can call him that, performs miracles with his pathetic galley. Little more than a hot plate wedged between machinery that radiates heat and resentment. He works shirtless, sweating directly into every meal, cursing as he wrestles dented cans into something vaguely edible. There's no mess hall. You eat wherever you find space. Perched on a pressure valve, crouched beneath a torpedo rack, or balanced on a crate. Plates are rare. Bowls are communal. You eat with whatever's clean, meaning it's dried from its last use. Dropped food follows the 3-second rule, which, in this context, means yes, it's still edible. Coffee is the last vestige of civilization, though it's not real coffee, just ersatz, a bitter chicory brew that sometimes carries an oily sheen from the engine room. You drink it because warm liquid is comforting, because it's something to hold, because it's one of the few rituals left that feels human. Sugar is precious. Real milk is a fairy tale. Occasionally, the brew has a metallic aftertaste no one investigates too closely. Holidays pass unmarked except for the occasional opening of special rations, ancient tins from the back of the stores meant to boost morale. Once, the crew was given sauerkraut containing a human tooth. No one determined if it belonged to a factory worker or a very unlucky rat. It was eaten anyway. Everything gets eaten, even the things that shouldn't be. Hunger makes philosophers of them all. You start pondering the ethical line between sustenance and self-punishment. When rations run low, and they always do, meals shrink into salty, barely recognizable lumps. Hunger creeps in like dampness, slow, pervasive, inescapable. You dream of meals you wasted back home. Real butter, fresh bread, cheese that doesn't glow in the dark. Some nights, you hallucinate soup, steaming in a white bowl, a proper spoon, a napkin. Then you wake to a cockroach on the ceiling and someone's foot in your face. Yet your body adapts. Not because the food improves, but because your standards disintegrate. You stop tasting. You chew and swallow mechanically, like fueling a broken machine. You lose weight steadily, belt notches tightening, cheeks hollowing, skin taking on a sickly pallor. Your stomach shrinks. Your cravings simplify. The day someone finds a half-rotten potato becomes the highlight of the week. You'll remember that potato fondly, not because it was good, but because for one fleeting moment, it reminded you what food was supposed to be. Then it's gone. Time dissolves in the belly of the U-boat. There are no mornings here, no nights, no sunrise to mark the passage of hours, no birdsong to herald a new day. The only measure of time is the shift bell, a flat, joyless clang that means it's your turn to do something unpleasant again. You exist in a metal womb suspended between surface and seabed, severed from clocks, from calendars, from the very concept that hours should mean anything. Your body loses rhythm fast. You sleep in feverish snatches, wake unsure if you've been unconscious for minutes or days, then trudge off to perform tasks you no longer question. Time melts into routine, routine into exhaustion. The day fractures into watches, maintenance, and the illusion of sleep. On duty in the control room, you stare at dials and gauges, listening for sounds that might mean flooding, mechanical failure, or an enemy eager to erase you from existence. Most shifts pass in silence, which isn't comforting, just the calm before something starts leaking or exploding. You fight to stay alert, but your body rebels. Eyelids droop, thoughts scatter. A cough or a hissing valve jolts you back, your heart skipping like a faulty engine. When not on watch, you're working. Maintenance never ends. Pipes corrode. Bolts vibrate loose. Gauges lie. Air filters clog. You scrub mildew off walls that have surrendered to it, twisting into impossible angles. The engine room is its own circle of hell, deafening, sweltering, perpetually on the verge of catastrophe. You emerge drenched in sweat and someone else's machine oil, hands raw from wrestling uncooperative wrenches. Gloves are a luxury. So are instructions. You do what you're told or guess. If you're lucky, your repairs hold. If not, an officer appears. They don't need to yell. Their presence alone screams failure. Meals break the monotony, but not pleasantly. You eat because the schedule says to, not from hunger. Food is just something to do with your hands. You chew slowly, staring at a light fixture, pretending not to hear the man beside you slurping from a shared tin. Cleanup is perfunctory, a swipe with a greasy rag, a rinse from a canteen, then back to work or your coffin like bunk. If the shift gods are kind, sleep comes, not rest, just pause. A brief escape into something quieter, though never truly unconscious. You dream of alarms, of flooding compartments, of being summoned to your post only to find it underwater. Most crewmen snore. Some talk in their sleep. One wakes screaming weakly like clockwork. No one comments. You just wait for him to quiet down and roll over. Hygiene exists in theory. Showers don't. Your best hope is a sponge bath with cold water from a basin shared by half the crew. Soap runs out fast. Towels stay perpetually damp. You wipe yourself down and hope you're not just spreading fungal infections from one armpit to another. Shaving happens rarely and without enthusiasm. Haircuts are done with scissors last used on electrical wiring. Eventually, everyone starts to look the same, grayish, puffy, exhausted, like ghosts who still sweat. Some men mark days in notebooks or carve lines into bunk edges, but the marks blur. Was that yesterday's watch or today's? Did you eat breakfast twice or not at all? Morale doesn't die suddenly. It flakes away, piece by piece, until only dust remains. You notice new smells, sweat turning sharper, breath gaining a fruity tang, ketosis, someone says, or starvation. It doesn't matter. There's no doctor. Just more waiting, more pretending the walls aren't closing in, even as the ceiling feels lower every time you wake. Wake, work, eat, work, sleep, repeat. You try to remember what day it is. You fail. You try to recall your last real conversation. It was probably about pipes, or fuses, or silence. Every day feels identical because it is. You're not counting down to anything, just enduring, hour by hour, shift by shift, trapped with people you can't escape, doing things you can't avoid. And beneath it all, the engines drone on, steady, relentless, slightly out of tune, like a lullaby you never wanted to hear. The engines are not just machinery, they're the boat's faltering heartbeat. You don't merely hear the diesels, you live inside them. Every surface in the aft sections thrums with mechanical vibration, as if the entire submarine is breathing and labored, so choked gasps. The rhythms tattoo themselves into your bones, the coughing ignition, the guttural growl at cruising speed, the rattling crescendo when pushing full power. The noise isn't just sound, it's physical sensation, buzzing in your molars long after your shift ends. Real silence no longer exists in your memory. There's always a hum, a clatter, a whine, even when the engines stop, and that's when terror strikes. Your ears keep ringing, as if afraid to admit the truth. Engine silence never means good news. Either they've failed, or the boat is diving to hide, which means death is hunting you from above. You learn to diagnose the boat's health through sound like a doctor with a stethoscope. Too high-pitched? A bearing's failing. Too rough? Fuel contamination. Silence? Prey. On the surface, the diesels roar with desperate authority, gulping precious oxygen as the boat charges like a hunted animal. The heat they generate turns aft compartments into ovens wrapped in body odor. Ventilation fans just redistribute the smoke. Soon everyone breathes diesel, sweats diesel, is diesel. After 3 days, your sinuses coat themselves in soot as a survival mechanism. Submerged, the electric motors take over with their insectoid whine. The boat hums like a trapped wasp, powered by massive batteries that dictate your lifespan. Every surface moment is a risk to recharge. Every submerged hour is a countdown to suffocation. If the batteries die, so does everything: propulsion, lights, air scrubbers. You become a steel coffin drifting into the abyss. No one says this aloud. They don't need to. You're no engineer, but you'll become intimate with these machines anyway. Maintenance is constant. Oil leaks like bleeding wounds. Belts stretch like tired muscles. Screws vanish like deserters. The engine room is a symphony of burns and curses. You crouch in impossible positions, tools slipping in sweat-slick hands, while fluids of dubious origin pool at your feet. Heat is the silent killer. The engines bake the compartments. The wool uniforms trap it. 50 bodies radiated. Shirts become optional not for comfort, but because fabric turns into a paste that bonds with your skin. The noise and heat merge until your thoughts feel slow-cooked. Dizziness hits randomly. Everyone gets it. There's no breeze, no relief, just the endless churn of pistons and the creeping realization: this is how we die. When components fail, and they always do, you know immediately. The pitch shifts. The vibrations turn jagged. Panic spreads faster than the oil leak, because a broken engine might mean a broken boat, and there are no repair shops at 200 meters. Troubleshooting happens in near darkness, fingers numb, officers hovering with silent accusations. The engines have personalities. They stall when someone mentions good luck. They groan differently in high humidity. They protest after depth charges like bruised veterans. Some crewmen talk to them, whispering pleas or threats as if coaxing a stubborn mule. No one laughs. You do it too. And yet, you rely on this agony. The hum becomes your pulse. You notice its absence before the alarms do. The engines are monstrous, oppressive beasts, but they're also all that stand between you and the crushing dark. As long as they scream, so do you. It's a pact forged in desperation, until the day they stop. And the boat goes quiet in a way you didn't know was possible. The sonar ping slices through the hull like a scalpel. One moment you're lost in the mechanical monotony. The next, every man aboard is frozen mid-motion. It's not the sound itself that terrifies, but what follows. The terrible silence where the ping's echo should be. That's when you know. They found you. Depth charges don't announce themselves with warning shots. They arrive as gifts from above, steel barrels packed with enough explosives to turn your world inside out. The first detonation is always a surprise. You feel it before you hear it, a deep, visceral thump that vibrates through the deck plates and into your molars. Then another. Then 5 at once. The air itself seems to shudder. Dust rains from pipe joints. Your stomach contracts like it's trying to crawl up your throat. You count seconds between blasts, trying to calculate distance, pretending this math could save you. It won't. They're hunting blind, but they're learning. There's no drill for this reality. No training can simulate the way a close hit makes the boat buck like a spooked horse. A wrench clatters to the floor. A pipe bursts with a hiss. Someone is thrown against a bulkhead with a wet grunt. The walls scream. The deck heaves under your boots like it's trying to throw you overboard. And in that suspended moment, between the explosion and the inevitable aftershocks, you understand your powerlessness. This isn't battle. There are no trenches to dig, no cover to take. This is extermination by geometry. They drop explosives into the ocean and wait. You either implode or you don't. Someone vomits. Someone else is reciting names, family, childhood pets, like incantations against the inevitable. The lights flicker demonically. The hull groans like a living thing in pain. And yet, the routine persists. Orders still snap through the chaos. Gauges must be watched. Ballast must be adjusted. You're expected to function while the ocean tries to crush you and the sky tries to bomb you. Terror doesn't pause duty. You seal leaks with shaking hands. You pass tools without speaking. You nod when spoken to, your voice lost somewhere between your ribs. The alternative is standing still long enough to notice your heartbeat has gone irregular. When the barrage ends, if it ends, no one announces the all clear. There isn't one. You just wait, staring at pressure gauges, listening for new sounds, the groan of stressed metal, the sinister drip of water where no water should be. The whole boat feels traumatized. Systems still function, but differently now. A valve hisses more than before. The engine makes a new noise like it's clearing its throat. You pretend not to notice. Eventually, someone makes a joke. Always. Something crude about British aim or American explosives. The laughter is brief, hollow, not amusement, just proof you're still breathing. The cook serves whatever's left of the meal, lukewarm gruel or crackers smeared with grease. You eat slowly, methodically, not from hunger, but because that's what living things do. Later, in your bunk, you close your eyes and wait for the next round. Maybe in an hour. Maybe at dawn. Maybe never, which is worse in its own way, because you'll never stop listening. You dream of implosions, of rivets popping like gunshots, of the sea rushing in black and cold and final. They say you don't hear the one that kills you, but you hear all the ones that don't. And that's the real punishment. The air turns against you slowly, like a lover growing cold. At first, you barely notice, just a slight heaviness when you inhale, a vague metallic taste at the back of your tongue. You blame the engines, the stress, the endless canned food. But the truth is more insidious. The carbon dioxide scrubbers are losing their battle. Oxygen isn't free here. Every breath is borrowed, every exhale poison. The boat's systems recycle air through filters older than some crewmen, scrubbing and straining until the chemicals are exhausted. Oxygen canisters help, but they're rationed like ammunition. When submerged too long, the balance tips and the air becomes a slow-acting toxin. It starts with headaches. That's normal, everyone has them. Then your thoughts turn syrupy. Sentences dissolve mid-word. You stand in the torpedo room for 5 minutes before remembering why. Others fare worse. One man giggles nonstop until someone slaps him. Another traces rust patterns like they're sacred texts. No one intervenes. What would you even say? The smell intensifies as CO2 builds. Sweat turns vinegary, unbrushed teeth reek of decay. The ever-present mold takes on a sweet, nauseating edge. You try meditation, controlled breathing, anything to stave off panic humming at the base of your skull. Nosebleeds come randomly. Gums swell. Your tongue feels like old leather no matter how much you drink. When someone faints at his post, they call it dehydration. Everyone knows better. You light a match to test the air, a trick from training. It sputters and dies. That's when the officers finally act, opening emergency valves with a hiss of precious oxygen. The relief is instant. Like cold water in hell, color returns to faces. Someone tells a joke that almost lands. But the lesson sticks. Air isn't a given. It's currency. Every lungful spent brings you closer to the debt collector. You develop new prayers now, not to gods, but to filters and seals. You fear the air because when it's gone, nothing else matters. The medic's cabinet holds more despair than medicine. No doctors grace these steel halls, just a metal box bolted to the wall. Its contents pitifully inadequate. Iodine that stings like betrayal, aspirin as effective as wishes, gauze that sticks to wounds like a guilty conscience. The designated medic wears a red cross patch, but carries the haunted look of a man who's read half a first aid manual once. Injuries begin innocently enough. A skull cracked on low-hanging pipes, fingers crushed in hatches, ribs bruised from slipping on oil-slick floors. The boat's constant motion makes even standing a hazard. Bruises bloom like dark flowers. Blisters burst and reform on palms raw from turning stubborn bolts. No gloves. No sympathy. Keep working. Then come the infections. Nothing heals properly in this damp tomb. Cuts fester under mildewed bandages. A scrape on your knuckle swells angry red. Then warm, then throbs with every heartbeat. The medic shrugs and wraps it tighter. Rest, he says. You both know that's impossible. Illness spreads faster than gossip. One cough in the night becomes a symphony of wheezing by dawn. There's no quarantine, only shared air and shared utensils. When submerged, your breath becomes a viral relay race. Someone always has a cold. Sometimes it becomes pneumonia. Hope is your only medicine. Dental pain is a special hell. A minor ache becomes a white-hot dagger with every bite. There are no dentists here, just pliers and moonshine. If it gets bad enough, they hold you down while the medic yanks, your scream muffled by a rag that's seen other mouths. Afterwards, you lie in your bunk with a face swollen like rotten fruit, wondering why you're still alive. Skin conditions flourish in the damp. Rashes bloom under arms, behind knees, anywhere sweat pools. Fungus transforms feet into peeling monstrosities. One crewman's toes grow something that makes others flinch. No one mentions it. Shame left with the last port call. But the worst ailments are invisible. The trembling hands you blame on fatigue. The numbness in fingertips. The way one sailor stares too long at blank walls, his pupils wide and black like the ocean at midnight. You check for fever, ask if he's okay. He lies. You let him. When real catastrophe strikes, a broken limb, A seizure, it's all hands on deck. Someone fetches the medical box. Someone else finds a board for splinting. Officers bark orders while everyone pretends they know what they're doing. If it's bad enough, the captain considers surfacing, but surfacing invites death from above. So the injured man moans softly, praying the boat survives long enough to reach land. Some do, some don't. And then there's gangrene. You've heard the stories but never wanted the proof until the day you catch the smell. Foul, sweet, wrong. The medic has no antibiotics, just iodine and terror. Sometimes limbs can be saved. Sometimes. There's a hacksaw in the engine room. Its teeth rusted, but still sharp. Just in case. The official treatment for most ailments? Rest. But rest doesn't exist here. You work through fevers, limp on swollen ankles, pretend the ringing in your ears is just the engines. There are no sick days in a steel coffin. Only grit, guesswork, and the quiet understanding that if something inside you breaks, really breaks, no one is coming to fix it. The sea doesn't care about survivors. When the boat limps back to port, scarred, leaking, its crew hollowed out like rotten timber, no cheering crowds await. Just dockworkers with clipboards, their eyes glazing over at yet another U-boat's return. You climb the ladder for what should feel like a triumph, but the sunlight is too harsh, the sky too vast. Solid ground feels like a betrayal beneath your unsteady feet. You've become a stranger to the world above. Your uniform hangs loose on a frame that shed 15 kilos. Your skin is a patchwork of oil stains and pallor, your hair falling out in clumps as if the boat claimed it as tribute. Civilians stare at your sunken eyes and twitching hands, then quickly look away. They see the U-boat stare, that vacant, flinching gaze of men who've lived too long in metal. Some of your crew are missing. Not all ghosts stay beneath the waves. The ones who died quickly were lucky. You watched others fade slowly, their coughs turning wet, their skin graying until they were carried away in silence. You remember their names, but bite your tongue. Speaking them makes the weight unbearable. Shore leave is a cruel joke. You lie in a real bed under clean sheets, staring at a ceiling that doesn't drip, and still wake every 2 hours convinced the hull is failing. The silence is deafening. The stillness feels wrong. You drink to slow your racing thoughts, smoke to steady your hands, stop writing letters because there are no words for this. They don't ask if you're ready for the next patrol. The orders are already cut. Another boat, another mission, another roll of the dice. You'll go, not for duty or honor, but because the surface world no longer makes sense. What would you even do up here? Who could understand? The sea has remade you in its image, a creature of pressure and darkness. The boat gets patched up, repainted, reloaded. They scrub out the stains and pretend she's new. But you know the truth, she's as tired as you are, held together by rust and desperation. When you board again, her hull creaks in recognition. You nod back. You survived. Your friends didn't. Your soul didn't. And the cruelest truth? You'll keep going until the sea claims you. Because in the end, you were never a sailor, just a number in a ledger. One of 40,000 U-boat men, 30,000 of whom will never return. No monuments will bear your name. No one will remember how you choked on chemical air or wept silently into a mildewed pillow. If you vanish, it will be without ripple or remark, just another mystery in the deep. The ocean is patient. It always wins. The final dive begins without fanfare, just a shudder through the hull that feels different this time. Maybe it's a mine you didn't see. Maybe a torpedo found you first. Or perhaps the sea simply grew tired of waiting and chose this moment to crush the metal egg that dared trespass its depths. The boat groans, not the usual protest of stressed steel, but a death rattle that vibrates through your boots. Lights flicker like candle flames in a crypt. The engine's hum stutters, coughs, then falls silent. Something heavy rolls across the floor. A wrench, a bowl, someone's forgotten boot. No one speaks. The air thickens with the sour tang of sweat and fear. You check gauges out of reflex. Depth 150 meters. Power failing. Hull integrity uncertain. The captain's voice cuts through the gloom, calm as a headstone. Prepare emergency buoy. It's not an order, it's an epitaph. Someone asks about a distress signal. The radio operator hesitates. Broadcasting could summon predators. Silence means no one will ever know how you died. The debate happens in whispers, like children arguing over nightmare monsters. Eventually, the transmitter clicks on. Then you wait. Waiting is the cruelest torture. The hull holds, for now. Oxygen dwindles by the hour. You sit shoulder to shoulder with men whose faces have already gone slack with resignation. Someone's watch ticks loudly. Why does it still work when nothing else does? A drip echoes from the forward compartment. Or is it your imagination? One sailor writes a note on the back of a maintenance log. Just a few words, folded small, tucked into his breast pocket. No one asks what it says. You consider writing your own, but stop. What could you possibly add to the thousands of unsent letters already dissolving in this graveyard? The cold comes next. Not the chill of winter, but the slow seep of eternal depths pressing in. Your breath fogs in the dimming light. Fingers grow stiff. Lips crack. Some men slump against each other like marionettes with cut strings. Others stare at the ceiling as if reading their fate in the rust patterns. The match test becomes ritual. Strike, flare, die. Each failed attempt shrinks the world a little more. When the last oxygen canister empties with a hiss, no one protests. The CO2 scrubbers gave up hours ago anyway. You think of home. Not the propaganda postcard version, but the forgotten details. The squeak of your mother's clothesline pulley, the way morning light fell across your childhood bed, the smell of fresh bread from a bakery that might not even exist anymore. The faces of loved ones blur. You can't recall if your sister's eyes were blue or green. Someone starts singing. Not a war song, not a hymn, just a drinking ditty from some vanished port. Others join in, voices rasping like rusty hinges. The words dissolve into coughing, then silence. The hull creaks, a long, weary sound. Metal remembers its true nature down here. It wants to collapse, to return to the earth. You don't blame it. Darkness fills the boat like rising water. The last light bulb pops with a tired sigh. Someone grips your hand in the blackness. You can't tell who, and it doesn't matter. The ocean has always been patient. It always wins. Somewhere above, the buoy breaks surface, bobbing uselessly in an empty sea. Its message goes unheard. The waves roll on. The war ends elsewhere, without you. News comes in broken transmissions, garbled words about surrenders and ceasefires, fragments of a world moving on. The U-boat docks for the last time, but no one cheers. The crew stumbles onto the pier like ghosts emerging from a shipwreck, squinting at sunlight that feels like an accusation. Your surrender is a paperwork formality. Officers snap their pistols into neat leather cases. Enlisted men fold their dirty uniforms with strange care. The victors inspect your boat with clinical curiosity, poking at dials and valves like archaeologists examining some primitive machine. None of them ask what it was like. None of them meet your eyes. You're given a cot in a prisoner camp, cleaner than your bunk ever was. The food is bland but plentiful. Real bread without mold, meat that doesn't glow in the dark. You eat slowly, methodically, waiting for the catch. It never comes. Sleep is the hardest habit to break. You still wake every 2 hours, heart pounding, reaching for a wrench that isn't there. The silence of the barracks is worse than depth charges. At least bombs followed predictable rhythms. Here, every snort sounds like a sonar ping. They debrief you in sterile rooms. Men with crisp collars and clean fingernails ask about tonnage sunk, convoy routes, technical specifications. No one asks about the cook who talked to sausages, or the boy who cried himself to sleep every night, or the way the hull groaned when you passed 200 meters. Those stories stay bottled up, fermenting like the spoiled rations in your gut. Time passes differently now. Days have names again. Sundays smell of chapel polish and weak coffee. You get letters from home. Your sister's eyes were hazel, it turns out, but the words swim on the page. How do you explain that part of you is still down there, listening for pumps and hissing valves? They offer you discharge papers, a train ticket, a handshake that feels like being handed someone else's life. The civilian clothes itch. The streets are too loud. You catch yourself calculating the tonnage of passing trucks, the draft of river barges. Old habits die harder than U-boat crews. Sometimes at dusk, you walk to the harbor and watch the fishing boats come in. The smell of diesel makes your pulse quicken. A particular shade of rust will trigger memories so vivid you taste copper on your tongue. You never go aboard. The official records will call you a survivor. The numbers will say you beat the odds. But the sea knows the truth. No one really leaves the boat. You just learn to breathe around the weight of it. The ghosts follow you home. Not the dramatic kind that rattle chains. These are subtler hauntings. The way your hands still twitch when a tea kettle whistles too high-pitched, like a steam valve about to burst. How you count seconds between thunderclaps, measuring imaginary depth charge intervals. The nightmares don't come every night, but when they do, you wake with the taste of copper and diesel in your mouth, sheets tangled like emergency hatch cords. Your family doesn't understand. How could they? They see a man who came back whole. 2 arms, 2 legs, no visible scars. They don't see how you startle at crowded rooms, how you carve your food into tiny, precise portions like rationing for a 40-day patrol. At dinner, when your father boasts about your service to the fatherland, you stare at the potatoes on your plate and remember the ones that sprouted pale tendrils in the boat's damp hold. The government gives you a pension, barely enough for rent, but more than the nothing you expected. The money smells like guilt. You spend it on whiskey and silence. Work is impossible. The factory foreman fires you after a week when you freeze up during a fire drill, the alarm's shrill scream, sending you scrambling for a non-existent damage control station. The bakery job lasts longer, until you punch a customer who grabs your wrist to ask for change. His shocked face floats in your dreams alongside the crewman who didn't make it back. You try writing it down once. The words come out wrong. Too clinical when describing the stench of 50 unwashed men, too poetic about the way light filtered through the periscope at dawn. No paper could hold the truth of watching a 19-year-old seaman slowly lose his mind to oxygen deprivation, whispering numbers to the bulkhead until someone slapped him quiet. You burn the pages in the stove. Spring comes. The world renews itself with obscene cheerfulness. Cherry blossoms drift through the bombed-out cities like pink snow. Children play in rubble piles, their laughter bouncing off broken walls. You watch them and wonder which ones will grow up to climb inside new metal coffins when the next war comes. Because there will always be a next war. The ocean taught you that much. At the pub, other veterans tell their stories. Grand tales of tank battles and dogfights, of glory glimpsed through smoke and flame. You sip your drink and say nothing. What could you add? That you spent the war hiding? That your greatest skill was enduring? That you still sometimes wake gasping, convinced the air has turned to poison? One rainy afternoon, you visit the Naval Memorial. The stone lists names in neat rows, thousands of them, but not nearly enough. Not the boy who wept in his bunk, not the cook who went mad, not the 30,000 who sank without witness. You trace the engraved letters with fingers still calloused from turning valves, and realize with dull surprise that you're crying. The salt on your lips could be tears or ocean spray. After all this time, you can't tell the difference anymore. The sea calls you back one last time. Not in dreams this time. A real notice arrives. Crisp, bureaucratic paper summoning you to the scrapyard where your U-boat lies gutted. They're breaking her down for parts. The letter explains, as if discussing a tractor. You tell yourself you won't go. Then you're on the train, hands shaking, staring at landscapes that no longer feel familiar. The yard stinks of rust and diesel, a perfume from your nightmares. Workmen swarm over the carcass like ants on a dead whale, torches cutting her open with surgical indifference. You stand frozen at the dock, suddenly afraid to touch her. This metal beast that housed your terror, your sweat, your last shreds of hope, now reduced to scrap iron pricing. A foreman mistakes you for a supervisor. We're salvaging the engines first, he says proudly, pointing to where men are winching out the diesels that once vibrated in your bones. You want to scream that those aren't machines. They're the boat's lungs, her heart, the last witnesses to all you endured. Instead, you nod like a ghost approving its own autopsy. They let you board. The conning tower ladder feels smaller now, the rungs worn smooth by desperate hands. Below decks, the smell hits you like a fist. Oil, mildew, and something deeper, something human that no amount of solvent can erase. The workmen have stripped the panels, exposing wiring like nervous systems torn from a spine. Your bunk is already gone. In the control room, A young laborer pauses to wipe sweat, his boot kicking a forgotten tin cup. It rolls to your feet. The same chipped enamel the radio man used to drink his ersatz coffee. You pocket it before the boy can notice. At the engine room doorway, your breath catches. The space where you spent countless hours fighting to keep the heart beating is just an empty steel womb now, echoey with the shouts of men who never knew her alive. One workman pauses to curse a stubborn bolt, the same one you stripped your knuckles on during that depth charge attack off Iceland. You could tell him the trick, a quarter turn counterclockwise first, but the words die in your throat. Back on deck, the foreman offers you a cigarette. Must have been hell in these things, he muses, blowing smoke toward the conning tower. You stare at the horizon where sea meets sky, the line you once watched through a periscope. What answer could possibly bridge the gap between his curiosity and your memories? Between the living and the drowned? They were, you say finally. The past tense tastes like lies. Walking away, you pass a pile of cut-up plating. A fragment catches your eye. 3 words scratched near a weld seam. Pray harder. You kneel, pretending to tie your shoe, and slip the metal shard into your coat. The foreman waves as you leave. You don't look back. On the train home, you clutch your stolen relics. The cup, the plating, like holy relics. The woman across the aisle smiles at what she assumes are souvenirs. Let her think that. The dead don't need explaining. That night, you bury the artifacts in the garden under a cherry sapling. No marker, no ceremony. Just you and the earth and the things too heavy to carry. When the wind stirs the young branches, it sounds almost like the sea, almost like home. Years unspool like depth charges sinking into oblivion. The cherry tree grows taller than you, its roots cradling your buried relics. You take a wife, a quiet woman who doesn't flinch when you wake shouting about flooding compartments. She learns to read the weather in your hands, how they tremble less on sunny days, how they still sometimes twist invisible valves when thunder rumbles. You have a son, then a daughter. Their laughter is the first sound that ever drowned out the phantom engine hum in your skull. Work comes eventually. A watchmaker hires you for your steady hands and patience with tiny mechanisms. The shop's quiet precision becomes a balm. Gears and springs obey predictable rules, unlike the sea's treachery. Customers comment on how you listen to timepieces like they're whispering secrets. They don't know you're straining for another sound beneath the ticking. The steady hiss of compressed air, the groan of bulkheads, the silence before the deep charges fall. Some anniversaries you drink. Others you spend walking along the riverbank, skipping flat stones and counting how long before they sink. The children think it's a game. You let them. When the nightmares come less often, you almost miss them. Those visceral nights when the past felt closer than the present. Now you forget things. The cook's face, the exact pitch of the dive alarm, how many men shared your bunk rotation. The memories don't vanish cleanly. They fray at the edges, like old photographs left in the damp. One autumn afternoon, your son finds your discharge papers while searching for fishing tackle. "Papa," he asks, holding up the faded document, "were you a hero?" You look at his smooth face, untouched by the knowledge of how metal smells when it's buckling under pressure, and choose your words like defusing a mine. "I was just a man who got very good at waiting." He nods, unsatisfied but wise enough not to press. Later, you catch him imitating your careful valve-turning gesture while fixing his bicycle. The sight sends you stumbling into the garden, where the cherry tree's leaves are turning the color of rust. That night, you dream of the boat for the first time in months. Not the terror or the stench, but the quiet moments. The way sunlight fractured through the periscope at dawn, the soft singing between watches, the warmth of 50 men breathing together in the dark. You wake with salt on your lips and an odd lightness in your chest. At breakfast, your daughter complains about the eggs. You laugh, a real laugh that startles even you, and tell her about the time the cook served sauerkraut with a human tooth in it. Your wife gasps. Your son's eyes go wide. For the first time, the story doesn't taste like grief when you tell it. The war ends differently for everyone. For some, it's a signed treaty. For others, a bullet or a bomb. For you, it's this. Morning light through kitchen windows, children bickering over breakfast, The cherry tree's shadow stretching toward the house like it's trying to whisper something. You go to work. The shop's bell jingles. A customer asks you to check his pocket watch. It's running slow. You press it to your ear and nod. Just needs cleaning, you say. Everything does, eventually. The sea never forgets. Decades later, when your hair has turned the color of winter foam and your children have children of their own, the nightmares still come, just softer now, like waves breaking on a distant shore. You wake not screaming, but sighing, the details already slipping away like water through fingers. Your wife sleeps through it these days, her breath steady as a well-tuned engine. The watchmaking shop closed years ago, but neighbors still bring you broken clocks. They say you have magic hands, that you know the truth. It's just patience learned in a darker classroom. While your gnarled fingers adjust hairsprings, your mind drifts to the boat's chronometer. How its steady tick was the only sane thing in that steel madness. One spring morning, a naval historian tracks you down. He's writing about U-boats and wants your story. The young man's eyes gleam with academic hunger as he sets up his recorder. You watch his clean fingernails tap the table and suddenly smell diesel oil. Tell me, he begins, about your most harrowing depth charge attack. You sip your tea, Earl Grey, not ersatz, and consider the question. The memories are still there, preserved like specimens in formaldehyde. The shuddering hull, the screaming pipes, the way young Dieter wet himself, but kept turning the oxygen valves anyway. But what surprises you is the other memories that surface. The cook sharing his last sausage, the engineer teaching you chess with nuts and bolts, the night the entire crew sang drunken shanties off-key. So you tell him about those instead. The historian's smile wilts. He prods for torpedo stats, kill counts, technical details. You give him what he wants, dates, coordinates, the make of your air scrubbers, but keep circling back to the human moments. How Jurgen could mimic seagulls perfectly. The way moonlight through the periscope turned the control room silver. The time you all laughed until you cried because someone farted during a silent running drill. Eventually, he packs up, disappointed. You walk into the door where your granddaughter is drawing chalk flowers on the patio. War's not what they teach in books, is it? You say, not unkindly. He leaves with your service records, but not your story. That belongs to the sea. Later, you take your granddaughter to the harbor. She skips ahead, her yellow dress bright as a buoy against the gray docks. When she asks why you're staring at the water, you tell her you're looking for old friends. They're all down there, she asks, solemn as only children can be. Some are, you say. Some are everywhere. She considers this, then demands ice cream. As you walk to the shop, her small hand in yours, the wind carries the scent of salt and diesel, just for a moment, just enough to make you pause. But the moment passes. The ice cream melts. The world moves on. That night, you stand at the bedroom window watching the cherry tree sway. Its branches are thick now, strong enough to hold a child's swing. The war is as distant as the bottom of the ocean, and yet, sometimes, when the house creaks just so, you still turn your head slightly, listening for the boat's voice in the dark. She never answers. But that's all right. You've learned the hardest lesson the sea teaches, how to let go without forgetting. The last dive comes quietly, like a submarine slipping beneath calm waters. It's not dramatic, just a summer cold that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. The doctor uses words like pneumonia and weakened immunity, but you recognize the truth. Your body, like the old U-boat, has finally worn past the point of patching. Your family gathers, the wife who never asked you to be heroic, the children who only knew you as the man who fixed their toys, the grandchildren who think your trembling hands are just part of being old. They bring flowers that smell nothing like diesel oil, open windows to air out the sick room, play music that holds no echoes of death charges. One afternoon, when the others are downstairs arguing about medications, your eldest grandson lingers. He's at that age where curiosity wars with tact. Opa, he whispers, what was the scariest part? You expect the usual images to flood back, the buckling hull, the failing oxygen, the screams in the dark. But instead, you see the cook's face as he divided the last onion equally among 50 men. Being young, you rasp. Nothing's more terrifying than being young and not knowing it yet. He frowns, unsatisfied, but squeezes your hand before leaving. The door clicks shut, and the room fills with the golden light of late afternoon. It's the same color as the light that used to filter through the periscope at sunset, turning the control room into a cathedral. Your breathing grows shallow. The edges of your vision darken like a boat descending past the reach of sunlight. The sounds of the household, pans clattering, grandchildren laughing, your wife scolding someone, fade into a distant hum, not unlike the engines you once cursed and cherished. You close your eyes, and for the first time in 70 years, you're not afraid of the silence. The funeral is a small affair, just family, a few neighbors, the postman who always saved your pension check from the rain. They bury you under the cherry tree, its roots long since grown around those rusted relics from the boat. The priest says words about peace and rest, but your granddaughter leaves a different offering, a toy submarine she built from a kit, bobbing in the rain-filled hold before the soil covers it. Months pass. Seasons change. Your wife still sets your place at breakfast sometimes, then catches herself and moves the plate away. Your son inherits your tools and finds, tucked beneath the workbench, a sketch you'd made, not of the U-boat schematics, but of the crew's faces as you remembered them, smiling for once, clustered around a stolen bottle of schnapps. He frames it and hangs it in his study, though he can't name a single man in the drawing. Out in the world, new wars flare and fade. New submarines glide through deeper waters, their crews just as young, just as scared, just as certain their war is different. The ocean doesn't care. It keeps its secrets and it's dead without distinction. One spring evening, your widow sits under the cherry tree as petals drift down like snow. She presses her palm to the earth and swears she feels something vibrating, not the rumble of traffic or distant trains, but something deeper, slower, like the heartbeat of a great machine at rest. She smiles, though her eyes are wet. "Stubborn old man," she murmurs. Even now, you're still down there tinkering. The wind shifts. The petals swirl. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the tide turns. The submarine's final resting place becomes a family legend. Years after your passing, your great-grandson, a marine biologist, tracks down the wreck's coordinates through naval archives. The official records are dry as bone. You, for 29, scuttled 1945, approximate position 56 degrees north 11 degree W. But in his research vessel's sonar display, the shape that emerges is unmistakable. A long shadow nestled in the seabed, its outline softened by decades of silt and anemones. He dives alone, despite protocol. At 120 meters, his headlamp illuminates the conning tower first, its periscope still raised in a final, futile attempt to see the surface. Barnacles crust the steel like living memorial plaques. A curious cod darts through the open hatch where generations of crabs have made their home. Your old bunk space is now a cathedral of swaying kelp. The galley where the cook whispered to sausages has collapsed inward, its stove transformed into an artificial reef. And there, near the ruined engine block, something glints. The ship's chronometer, its glass miraculously unbroken, its hands frozen at 3:17. Later, back on deck, he holds the salvaged clock to his ear out of habit. To his astonishment, a single tick echoes inside the salt-crusted casing, one final pulse from the depths, as if the boat itself was waiting all these years to say goodbye. That evening, he emails photos to the whole family. Your widow, now 94, traces the screen with trembling fingers. "Look at all that rust," she whispers. Then, after a long pause, he'd be glad to know it's finally quiet down there. The chronometer finds its place on the mantel beside your old tools. Sometimes, when the house is still, your descendants swear they hear it ticking, though the mechanism remains stubbornly motionless. The sound, they decide, must be memory playing tricks. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it's the sea whispering back through time, not with the roar of depth charges or the scream of diving alarms, but with the patient, endless rhythm of tides that eventually smooth even the sharpest edges of war into something resembling peace. Generations turn like propellers in the deep. Your great-great-granddaughter, a historian specializing in wartime correspondence, uncovers a waterlogged notebook in Bremen's naval archives. The pages are warped with seawater, the ink blurred into ghosts of words, but one entry remains legible near the end. "If found, tell my son his father wasn't afraid of the dark, only of not seeing dawn." She traces the faded signature, your name, written in a hand far steadier than the trembling one she remembers from childhood visits. That evening, she places a photocopy beside the salvage chronometer, completing the shrine neither of them ever called a shrine. At the university where she teaches, students debate the ethics of submarine warfare. They parse tonnage statistics and convoy routes, arguing about military necessity with the fervor of those who've never heard bulkheads groan. She lets the discussion flow until a freshman asks, "But what was it really like down there?" The classroom falls silent. Outside, autumn leaves scrape across pavement like dry pages turning. She thinks of the chronometer's phantom ticks, of submarine blueprints where someone, you, had doodled fish in the margins, of the way her grandmother would hum an off-key tune while kneading dough. A melody no one recognized until they found your diary mentioning the cook's favorite shanty. It was. She hesitates, then picks up a chalkboard eraser. Hold out your hands. When the students obey, she drops the eraser. The cloud of white dust billows up, then begins its slow, inevitable descent. They watch, transfixed, as particles settle into hair, onto sweaters, across open palms. That she says softly, but for months. In a metal tube, with 50 other men. The bell rings. No one moves until the last mote of chalk is settled. Later, walking home past the harbor, she pauses where the pier lights reflect on dark water. The ripples form shifting patterns, maybe Morse code, maybe just tricks of the light. She smiles anyway and raises her hand in salute, not to the war, not to the boat, but to the stubborn flame of humanity that somehow kept burning in all that crushing dark. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a wave breaks. The ocean remembers nothing. The ocean remembers everything.